Okay. Sorry, I messed up your name.
Shall we? Yep.
Okay. All right, folks. I think we will get started. We'll let people trickle in as they come in. So I'm really excited about this session. This is really the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks of Gen Exponential. And the idea for Gen Exponential essentially is that the Global Entrepreneurship Network has been a great community. And the question is, how can that community become a platform for change? And so what we really have today is some inspirations for what we as a community can do to build and create platforms for transformative change, whether it's at the level of a city or a country or a set of countries that we can aspire to say is a global movement. But I think as you hear the stories that we're about to hear, I mean, I think some of you will have heard Arvind Gupta before, either at previous Global Entrepreneurship Congress events, Istanbul, actually in South Africa, you're on the plenary stage. Did you speak at Istanbul? Yep. And so it's been an ongoing opportunity for us in the GEC community to hear about Arvind's participation and now leadership working directly for the Prime Minister of India, really creating a digital nation and leapfrogging using exponential technologies to really transform daily lives for a country of 1.3 billion people. Shri is going to tell his own story, but Shri is a transformative entrepreneur working from the grassroots level, working from the neighborhood level, working entrepreneur by entrepreneur, but building a set of offerings, services that are, I think of them as being built around education and skills development, competency development, but they're really kind of goes beyond that. And I think the way in which Kuza has grown since I first heard about it in Nairobi in 2015 has, I just have a hard time keeping up because every time this story kind of evolves. So so what we're going to do is Arvind's going to speak a little bit about Digital India, and I've asked him to really start at the beginning of his career, because I think even though some of you may be familiar with Arvind, you may not necessarily know about how he started out, and then to talk about what he's been doing for the last sort of five years or so, working at the national level in India. And then Shri will go, and then it'll be mostly these two guys talking, but I'm going to chime in a bit. So go ahead.
Thank you, Phil. It's a cozy room. I know it's one of the last few sessions. So very interestingly, we've known, all of us has known each other in some capacity or other for many, many years. And Phil and me, we've co-authored multiple articles. One of them has become globally very famous for the Harvard Business Review. And I'll start with that, something from there. And something that was mentioned this morning with ex-president of Estonia. We're talking about exponential technologies, and one of the big things is, people have asked me and others, is what is exponential technologies? I think it's fair to say that none of us can say what is exponential technology or which technology is exponential, because, and I say this with, with history on my side, saying that everybody who's predicted anything about exponential technology has always gone wrong. 1993 was the year that my personal journey with the tech world started. I was in the US, and there was a project going on at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications where all researchers were encouraged to participate. One of those projects was technology that you now know as the browser. That time it was called the Mosaic, Project Mosaic. Way back in '93, some of these you may have not been born by then. So believe me when I say this, that early '93, when you're making the first web browser to the internet, we were really hunting for our first set of 5 customers. We were going around asking people, would you use a browser? People said, why would I use a browser? For what? What is the purpose of a browser? And today, that is become so exponential that it's got a 4 billion user base.
You want to mention who one of your first customers was?
So one of the first users and customers was, incidentally, I met him today for the first time in my life, was the former president of Estonia, President Toomas Ilves. And he got inspired by seeing the browser and changed Estonia into a digital nation. And that's how our lives connect. And we don't realize when we create something how exponential the impact can be. Given the technologists, the people around that are really subsumed by creating that product or that platform when they start out. So the large lesson in this is that what could be impactful in one part of the world, what could really explode in another part of the world, we don't know that. I relate that to another experience, a small experience, and this was a startup which was started by 8 or 10 people, and I think everybody in this room is probably using it right now. It's called WhatsApp. I think there will be very few people who are not using. Anybody not using WhatsApp in this room? I mean, generally the answer is no, 0. Everybody is using it. Why I say that is, started out in the US, in Mountain View, in a small cafe, and people were, and Raman is sitting, and he uses a product still called BlackBerry. This was the first set of people who started out making WhatsApp. The need was that it's a cross-platform. They wanted to make the BBM killer, because BBM could only go to BBM. So when they wanted to talk across from BBM to let's say a Windows product or a Android product or an iPhone, they couldn't do that. That was a pure intent of WhatsApp to start with. The US telcos said, hey, this is one of those products that comes and goes by. Last call, the telecom companies globally have lost over $1 trillion in text traffic, text pricing and revenue, and in call revenue, international call revenue, because of this one product called WhatsApp. $1 trillion aggregated over the last 10 to 12 years. So you can imagine how a small messaging platform has grown into a complete platform. A small messaging app has become a complete platform. That's exponential. Today, WhatsApp is probably the second or third highest set of phones in the world, probably with Google and Facebook. So this is the reach in a very short time that exponential technologies can have. In India, by the way, WhatsApp has now integrated with payments. It's the only country where WhatsApp is now becoming a genuine platform with integration to payments also. So it's going to offer payment services. So those were the first few opening remarks I wanted to make. The lesson being, what starts off as a small product, if it expands correctly into another market or adjacent technologies, it can quickly become exponential. It can become a platform. It can become something that is the killer platform. There are more WhatsApp. Just let me finish that. There are more WhatsApp users in India today than in the US, and I think that also tells a story that it started off in a small office in Mountain View, but didn't catch up so much in the US, but really has caught up big time in other geographies. So I'll leave it here. Sorry for you saying.
Well, I guess one thing I wanted to ask you has to do with the way platforms build on platforms. So, I mean, we had TCP/IP, and then the Mosaic built on top of that, right? You have various, telecom, communications protocols, In addition, I'm to TCP/IP. So I mean, essentially, WhatsApp is not necessarily building on a browser, but nonetheless, right? And then you're talking about payments that are integrated, and then so you have entrepreneurship that builds on those platforms. So if you could just sort of interact a little bit, I guess what I'm saying is at every stage we have an established platform. Once you have TCP/IP, then it suddenly creates an opportunity to build a platform on top of that, and then that becomes the frontier. Then that becomes essentially what more or less of a commodity or just used everywhere. So we don't really think about innovation in browsers per se, but there's a next generation to build on top of that. So there's always an entrepreneurial interaction with the platform that builds on the platform. So how would you kind of like lay that out since you've experienced it?
So this is very interesting. What Phil has asked is really the right question for a professor to ask.
Okay, I can't help being a professor.
In the discussion, because when certain things become a commodity, certain layers, a browser, a protocol, and in this case now, by default, WhatsApp has become a kind of a default. It is the innovation really comes on top of that. I can give you multiple examples. I think that I see a lot of people from India. Anybody from India apart from Raman and Padmaja? You know how many people in India today do mostly trading and e-commerce on WhatsApp? They're only sending links on WhatsApp. Education courses from vegetable vendors, everything is being transacted. So the innovation, and these are some of these companies I know are funded hugely. They're like mini unicorns already. They're not inventing, to answer your question, Phil, the WhatsApp platform. They're innovating on top of it. In China, I mean, the classical case is Tencent. WeChat started off as a messaging platform or a messaging application. Today offers airline ticketing, payments, and you don't need to get out of WeChat as a container. You can do almost everything over there. The innovation has been built on top of it. So, so to your point, as stages pass by, you will have the platform establishing itself and then becoming the dominant platform where that becomes, if you may call it, a commodity, and innovation will come on top of it. Earlier, it used to take 10 to 15 years to achieve that status. Today, I think it takes 2 to 3 years, 4 years maximum.
Yeah. And later, I think we'll get back to, because we didn't really talk about Digital India that much, but I think later we'll get back to how you're really creating those platforms from the government side, which is really unique, at least in the manner and way to which you've done it with the India stack. So, but Shri, should we just transition to Shri?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
So go ahead.
I put together a few slides. Can you roll the slides, please?
And we can actually, why don't we'll just step down for 1 minute so we can see the slides. And then
Yeah, so I wanted to share some of my personal experiences. I'm a serial and a social entrepreneur, started off in India, had an opportunity to travel to Africa for the first time late 2010 with the NASCOM delegation, and decided to live and invest in Africa. For the past 9 years, I've been doing some interesting work on the continent. All of us can relate to this, right? We have this no longer a stranger in our lives. My teenage daughter speaks to me on WhatsApp, sitting in the living room saying, "Dad, can we have lunch?" And I'm saying, "Yep." So people have stopped talking to each other as much as they are facing each other. And the same is happening even with the people at the bottom of the pyramid. Not all of them can afford a smartphone, but they're all interacting and interfacing with a flip phone or a touch phone. So here is an interesting trend that's happening. The attention span of people is going down. What used to be 15 minutes 3 years ago has come down to 5 minutes or going down to 2 minutes. This is a trend that we spotted early 2011, 2012. And I started investing in building short video content in 2 to 3 minutes. 2 to 3 minute video content, which can be easily consumed. I call it bite-sized learning. And we started saying, is there an echo coming? Is okay? Thank you. So when you look at the fusion between a smartphone, which is always on, always with you, connected, and has a rich user interface, can charge you, can bill you, and doing all of that, when we integrate this with a bite-sized, I love calling it as a in-the-moment learning, in the moment and in context. As a small micro entrepreneur, if you want to really go and understand what is meant by cash flow, financial management, they don't have the time nor the resources. They're always interested in learning about it in the moment, on demand, when they need it. So with this, I created an exponential organization. I love calling this as an exponential organization because we are growing on an average 14x year on year over the past 4 years. Working with the informal communities, helping them to learn, connect, and grow at scale. And the informal communities are like small farmers, construction workers, refugees, community health workers. And if you look at it, there are over 3 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid who don't have access to basic services and basic internet and other services. So this is the space that we've been going after. And show of hands, how many of you believe this? Teach someone how to fish and we can feed them for the rest of life. Show of hands. Actually, it's not true. Yeah, you fell in the trap, right? I want to quickly show you an interesting perspective. If you teach someone how to fish, fantastic. But then what happens? I know how to fish, but I don't have the toolkit. I don't have the fishing rod. I don't know how to go and fish. I don't know what kind of surface or waters I need to go. Do I need to go to a pond or a lake or an ocean? I really don't know. I need a toolkit. And I also need to understand that once I get like 10 fishes, I can eat one. What happens to the other 9? I need to be able to have a business skill to be able to go and sell it. And then you need access to market. So that is an ecosystem in my definition. Teaching someone just how to fish is not sufficient. We got to give them the entire toolkit. So I did some random trials. I'm going to flip back to this. This is what, Phil, you've seen in Nairobi in 2015. This was my first attempt where what we've done is we created skills in video format and we used the community structure like a Coca-Cola kiosk. In Kenya alone, there are close to 60,000 of such kiosks. And the business case is for every kiosk to be set up, the bottler needs to have at least 20,000 footfalls passing by every day. And this is where I went to Coca-Cola. I made about 67 visits to Coca-Cola company all the way to Atlanta, finally making them understand what I'm trying to make. The point is, you can do your business, but on the side, you can actually create a social corner. I'm sorry, I can't do this. So here is where people started coming in and sitting around. This is like a Starbucks in a slum. Okay, so they're coming in here, they access the content. We put a small Wi-Fi router there, and now they started consuming it and they started using it. Close to 26,000 micro entrepreneurs got created out of this initiative across 7 countries in a span of 2.5 years. Now, what is the key learning? We thought all of this youth are not too sure what they are doing with their lives. Answer is no. When you see thumbs down, the assumption was wrong. When we designed the program with Coca-Cola company, we were thinking that youth are all digitally literate, not necessary. Majority of the unemployed youth are looking for jobs. Answer is no. Especially in the African continent, they all want to be their own boss. In Kenya, an average Kenyan is doing about 3 businesses, 3 side hustles. Now this is phenomenal. And this is where we started looking at validating some of these ideas and then realized that the transformative power of technology will only work when assumptions of the past are forgotten. The uneducated of the next generation are those, they are not just the ones who can't read and write, but those who are not willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. This is where I built up a complete business model which looks like this. I want to quickly flip to an entrepreneur model. We created all of this and then said, to tell you the truth, mine is a 2% success story. I failed 98 times out of 100. For 5.5 to 6 years, I tried doing this again and again and again. Finally, we kind of hit upon a model which looks like this. We are going into the rural villages. We identify a rural youth, incubate them, seed them as a micro entrepreneur, give them a kit. I'm going to share with you the kit. And each of these entrepreneurs is now providing crop advisory, access to quality inputs like seeds, fertilizers, pesticides, access to credit, and access to markets through a platform-driven ecosystem model powered by our technologies. That's where we are using exponential technologies, and we are humanizing technology to solve a major social problem using a rural entrepreneur who is servicing about 200 smallholder farmers. We figured out a complete process. Hope is not a strategy. We had to put down the entire process of how do you select an entrepreneur, how do you train them, how do you launch them, how do you mentor them, and how do you go about doing this. So I took this African innovation. I'm proud to say that a Kenyan innovation is now gone global. It's in 42 countries. We took this to India, and we started partnering with different stakeholders, including World Bank, to start scaling it. And we had to create for 43 different crops micro-learning content. These are 2 to 3 minute video content on everything around a crop. How do you do disease management, pest management, and all of that. And we are sitting on a library of close to 5,000 plus videos on agronomy content. And this is how it looks. It's very short and crisp, fun and engaging. If there is a pest attack, that's when a farmer is interested in learning about it. Otherwise, he's not. That's what an entrepreneur is going to do, fulfill that. And trust is the currency on which we are operating. So today morning, we had this conversation where there are alternate currencies that are coming up. Trust is being one of the most important currency on which we are operating. And this is a backpack kit that we innovated. This is a small Wi-Fi router on your left-hand side. So the entire digital platform sits on this device, and this goes in a backpack because most of my farmers and the rural youth don't have access to smartphones. And this has built-in electronics. With just one cable, we are now able to charge all the devices. Now, all of a sudden, this democratized access to content and access to digital platforms operating through a human interface. Now, this is one key point I wanted to share with you, Phil, is you, end of the day, can have the best of the best technologies, but you still need a last mile, I love calling as first mile, human interface. In this case, we are talking of using youth as micro-entrepreneurs who are providing this human interface to be able to do this. This started giving us, this is few of the use cases. That's how the content is screened. And then people actually start interacting. Look at this elderly gentleman here. He didn't want to leave the tab. For the first time in his life, he was holding it, and in about 5 minutes, he figured out how to use it. And the next thing you know, he wants to live with it. Now, we have figured out the complete processes behind this, and it's a serious business going on. And here is where we are. Close to 4.5 million transactions are already done. This is just an 18-month-old initiative in India across 7 Indian states, and that's the kind of exponential growth that we are getting. And I wanted to show you the curve in which it took us close to 3 years to figure it out, and then the growth is now happening. And the entire ecosystem players are now getting integrated into this on an hourly basis, and this is something we are scaling across Asia and Africa. Now, my learnings are this. It is important for us to start digitizing. Once we digitize, we went through a deceptive phase. Let me go back and show you. Between 2015, 16, and 17, we could see magic happening, but we don't know what is the secret sauce. We just don't know what's happening. We are trying, it is working, and people are making money, but we don't know what is the secret sauce. That's a deceptive phase. It is only when we started seeing the disruption was visible only when we started seeing at a scale of 100,000 people. And beyond that, we started realizing that the dematerialization started happening. Earlier, we needed classrooms, we needed big boards, we needed big projectors. All of them started shrinking into a backpack. Now, my sense is in the next year or two, we don't even need a backpack. Even that would just dematerialize. Demonetization. There's no money being transacted. We don't charge anyone any money for doing this. It's only through the platform transactions that the entire ecosystem is moving, and that's where the democratization is happening. So these are all different innovations that are happening in the ag tech space. Close to $7 billion is already capital has been invested, and we told ourselves we don't have to necessarily build all of these technologies. As Kuza, what we are doing is we are only leveraging these technologies like an app store. We are plugging and giving them an opportunity to go down to the grassroots level to start demonstrating at scale. Now, we invested in building on the platform. On the bottom, you can see the different web, mobile, IoT, blockchain kind of technologies. But the humanization of this technology is what is happening in the top portion. When we started putting digitized content, conversations started happening. You just show a small clip for 2 minutes. That's when you can see the farmers responding and then saying, oh, this is something I tried, this is something that's not working. And then they come together, form themselves into a community or a cooperative, start collaborating, and then commerce is happening. And that's when the real democratization is happening. And at Kuza, we believe that if every small entrepreneur can employ just one other person, we can eliminate unemployment. It sounds simple and stupid, but it's a very powerful thing. Each one, employ one, we can eliminate unemployment. 2017, we won the UN SDG Innovation Challenge globally, and I want you to look at the numbers there. 151,000 new jobs got created in the just last 3 years, and I believe by this time next year, we would have created 1 million jobs. Just with this simple formula, each of these micro entrepreneur employing one other person. Thank you.
I told you it was going to be good stuff. I want to start with the last one because
Sure.
I don't have time to look up the numbers, but in the U.S., I think if you just look at, Dane probably remembers, but the number of entrepreneurs that employ at least one person, I think is about a fifth or a tenth of the total number of people who are self-employed. I think probably more like a tenth. Right? There's just a lot of people who are self-employed and don't employ anybody. Yeah, right. So it's like 5 to 1. Yeah, 5 to 1. So when you talk about having, of course, anybody who does employ one person, it's easier than much more likely that they'll employ a second or a third. So it's that going from 1 to 2 that's really challenging. But it also points to an opportunity because just the skill set that you need. It just shows how hard it is to just get the capacities.
Can I simplify this?
To hire one person.
The way I understood this is, we initially thought we were empowering one youth in the community as a micro entrepreneur.
Yeah, bring the mic over so you can.
I think it's on.
You're mic'd up. Okay, yeah.
So what we realized is the next thing he was doing is, I'm using he because 80% of the men come up, and the women are the silent killers. They are in the background, but they are the ones who are really running the business. Okay, so the next thing they do, they set up a shop. We help them incubate and set up a shop, and that is manned or woman by the woman in the family. And then approximately 3 people in the family get involved in the business. That's already 3 people who got into the business.
Right.
So it's not just one. We initially thought we were creating one, but we are actually creating 3.
Yep.
And as their portfolio work starts enhancing, growing, now they are bringing more and more family members into this. So these are all really small family-led businesses from the micro-level communities, and it's very powerful.
Yep, yep. Well, just the whole premise that the way that you lift up a community isn't immediately by lifting everybody up.
Mm-hmm.
It's by finding who in the community has the capacity to hire that one more person. Yeah. And then maybe the 2 or 3 more. And you're providing them with a vehicle to do that. Yep. I also thought the image of the elderly gentleman, the community getting engaged. I mean, you talked about these like Mythbusters, and it was interesting to see that list of things you found to not be true, right? Yeah. But it just shows you've got to get out there to kind of experiment. Arvind, so I have a question for you. So you're looking at that. I mean, you've known Sri for a while. You've tracked similar things like this, but you also know what you've developed with the India stack, right? So if you combine, and Sri's working in India. So if you could you elaborate a little bit what digital identity and payments and more transparent access to government services and loans, just kind of run through the India stack and talk about how it's an amplifier to what Sri is doing.
Now, first of all, I thought the copyright to the word demonetization lies with India and not with anybody else. So I was a bit scared to see that there because whenever our Prime Minister comes on TV these days to do an address to the nation, there are people queued up outside banks. So there are many people who may be familiar or not familiar with the India stack, but let me give you a simple example how India stack applies here. What is India stack? It is the interlinking of your identity with your bank account, with your payments, and with your documents which are digitally stored. It's a simply put, that's what India Stack is. Now, what does that mean? All of you use email over here? Yes, no?
I have used email.
Yes.
I have used.
You send an email, it is xyz@abc.com. You have address, abc.com, and you have an identifier that is XYZ in this case. We have done the same thing. We've created every bank is now, for example, abc.com. So there's a bank, State Bank of India.com. I'm simplifying it, .upi, ICICI.upi. Every bank is now an identifier. And before the identifier, what we have linked is your mobile number, your identity, and or your bank account, or an optional address. Could be your address. So for example, if I have to send money to Shri, I need to know if I have to send an email, I need to know which email I've sent to send it to. Similarly, if I have to send him money, what I need to do is I need to know either his identity number or his mobile number or his pseudonym, which is could be Shri at ICICI.upi, and I can just send, like I send an email through WhatsApp or any other app. I can just type amount, authenticate it, send him money. He'll receive it instantly in his bank. Now, what is this? This is part of India Stack. This is interlinking of your identity with your banking, with your documents, with your KYC documents, all working interoperably in a very, very simply put terms, simplest terms possible. Where does it help? The micro entrepreneurs that he's talking about, they probably carry a platform or device.
Yeah.
And today, there are a lot of people in the villages who need, who earn wages, but they need to transfer. These are migrant workers who need to transfer money back to their homes. Mm-hmm. Both sides. All they need to do is today come on that device, authenticate themselves, and the money will get transferred automatically, and the person can take money, the cash, if they've received cash, and actually just transfer that money to their back home to a bank account. And on the other side, similarly, people can receive money, and cash in and cash out can happen on this system absolutely seamlessly. Earlier, there were money lenders involved. There were people who would do this transaction through, let's say, a Western Union kind of setup. The kind of money that would get lost would be 15 to 20% in doing this transaction. So if a migrant worker in southern part of India had to transfer 10,000 rupees, $150 to his or her home in northern part of India, in Bihar, let's say, 10,000, 8,000 would reach the recipient. Today, all 10,000 gets transferred instantaneously, and all this transaction can get enabled by a platform like Kuza, and it's openly available to everybody. It's not that something that he has to build the payment system or the remittance system from scratch. It is available as open innovation.
Can I ask
you can
you,
make it in 2 days probably.
Wow.
Can I ask you just one quick question about that? So when you travel, at the village level, when you're talking to people, do they get what
they get it faster than we do.
I mean, in terms of like, is it like immediately taken for granted that they've just saved 2,000 rupees on every transaction, or is it something that, like a little bit like we have knowledge resources on the internet, and initially we thought it was great, now we just take it for granted? I'm just wondering.
So
like,
Phil,
how much
I can probably share my Africa experience on this.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's happening at an exponential rate in India.
Yeah.
But you heard of M-Pesa.
Yeah.
Now, 80% of people in Kenya are already using M-Pesa.
Right.
A normal the woman selling fish on the roadside,
Yeah.
she would have a normal phone and she would be using that to do the transactions.
Yep.
The volume of money transfer done by Western Union globally is less than what Kenya is doing alone on M-Pesa.
Yep.
That's how big it is.
Yeah.
It's just a 45
we
million
did,
people population.
We did the, I'm sort of proud we published the M-Pesa case in 2007 in my journal, and then sort of followed it up, and and actually one data point I heard just a number of years ago, maybe more now, is that there are more M-Pesa agents in Kenya than there are ATMs in the United States.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
true.
just in terms of the magnitude. But I guess, although I made it sound like a negative to say that people don't get it, it's just people's adaptability to change. I think we were talking yesterday about London during the Blitz, but
Yeah.
like within 2 weeks, the people in London had adapted to the new reality of being bombed every day. So it's just people's adaptability to a new environment. When a platform comes in, it's accepted, then people transition. Is that what your experience, or do you feel like there's a kind of a...
No, absolutely, and I think that is what is happening, the trust as a currency. The moment they start seeing this, the first transaction goes through, then the second transaction, third transaction is automatic.
Just assumed. It's just
And
assumed.
It's assumed and it goes viral.
Because, we're talking about exponential technologies, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's exponential behavioral change. And we tend to think about human
very
behavior
true.
as being sticky, but it's actually not
Yeah.
that sticky.
It is not.
Absolutely. It is not. It is absolutely not. And to what Shri was talking about, and I had a big slide on that. I didn't show it here. Is at the bottom of the pyramid, that 5% saving is a lot of saving.
That's what I'm saying. It's a huge amount, right?
And if that money can be saved by any means or methods, they will adapt to it very, very fast.
Yeah, absolutely.
And find out, and that news travels faster than anything else.
Yep.
You're talking about ATMs. This is where exponential growth and thinking has to happen also. One is technologies, one is behavioral change adoption, and the third is in thinking perspective. Post offices in India were getting very less used, as must be the case across the world.
Yep.
Now today we've converted every post office, every post person, postman, postwoman, into a walking bank. Everybody. This is the biggest bank in the world today actually. It started 6 months ago and rolled out September 2018 and maybe 6-7 months ago. And every post person today carries a device, identity-enabled device. It's an iris-enabled device, and can do any transaction that a bank can do. So ATMs are in passe. You don't need ATMs. We've talked about the fact that why do we go about building more banks or ATMs only, where you have these walking human ATMs, and they come to you. They come and do doorstep banking.
And I know one of the initiatives in the government that you've been involved in is health records and innovation in health services. I was just in Philadelphia talking to a guy who was really very early, sort of mid-1970s, healthcare to the home pioneer. He was doing diabetes care and services, and then expanded from there, became one of the largest companies in the U.S. providing those types of services. But he was talking about a 120-year-old hospital in Philadelphia that's just gone bankrupt, in part due to mismanagement, but in part due to this sort of slow decline in people using outpatient services, because they're doing more in the home. And I had not really thought about hospitals as being in the category like post offices, of institutions that are subject to digital disruption. But there's just a huge demand shift that happens.
So we are actually rolling out a major initiative with the UN Ops from Geneva,
Yep.
where we are using these last mile rural agents as health entrepreneurs. They are actually, we're already piloting in 6 countries. It would be in the news this September. They're all given a backpack. You have a basic BP measuring unit and a diabetes unit and your weight and other things. And they are going door to door, collecting the data, doing the diagnostics.
Yeah.
And these are all 93 low income countries. An average person there is earning $2 to $3 a day. And if somebody is earning that kind of a money and if he falls sick,
Yeah.
then the whole family is going hungry that night. So the impact of this is not being felt. And the only way to solve this problem, I believe, is to have this human user interface, as I love calling it.
So that's one thing I wanted to get back on, but I wanted to pick this up. And by the way, one of the things is, these are going to be videotaped and it's going to be online. And partly this is content that, we're hoping the whole Gen community will be interested in. That's why, although we don't have a lot of, kind of young entrepreneurs in the room, that they may be watching,
Yeah.
And so So this notion that you might say Facebook's already there, WhatsApp already there. You know, I can use these platforms, but they don't necessarily provide any opportunity for me, which is just the opposite, because you're talking about, you know, a whole set of opportunities in health entrepreneurship, or you guys found ag entrepreneurship. It's not where you started, but basically, you know,
We
the
ended
ag
up
techs,
there.
you ended up there.
I don't know where we are going. But the next $1 billion unicorn is going to be somebody who is going to solve a problem for 1 billion people.
Yeah, but that's right.
I mean, that's a path that we have defined for ourselves. If we are able to solve the problem for 1 billion people, $1 per person is nothing.
That's it.
Yeah,
You're done.
and they can afford to pay that.
Yep. And then, and in all of these areas, whether it's ag, health, you know, financial services, that there's so much undersupply. I mean, you guys face that with just not having a bank account.
Yeah, and I think what Sri just said, I'm going to say it even further. India is a classical case of value versus volume. You can have 100 customers giving you, you know, $1 each, or you can have 10,000 customers giving you 10 cents each. You can do the calculations who makes more money. So India is a classical case of value versus volume. We try to reduce the transaction sizes, as the fees. The transactions that I talk about, you know, you can now do credit card transactions, for example, by making these payments. I'll give you a very interesting example here. Today, when any country, mostly, if you swipe a card, what is called a merchant discount rate, MDR, a merchant pays about 2% of the transaction. So if $100 get transacted, 98 comes to the merchant. $2 is the network fees. India has made that almost zero. And
wow, is that real?
that's real, 0.2% MDR.
Wow.
For
On debit cards, yeah.
And 90% of the transaction is debit cards in India.
Okay.
The card transactions I'm talking about. So 0.2, because credit has a risk element to it, but debit has, I mean, you're taking from one bank account and putting it in another bank account. So, and that's the significance. Today you can do transactions and make money off it, not at 2% MDR or 1.5% MDR, but at 0.1% MDR.
Crazy.
10 basis points, because the volumes are not, you know, 10 million, 20 million. Last month, I think the volume was close to 700 million on this network, this homegrown payments network of India. So, value versus volume. I want to, what was the second part you had mentioned? You know, the human part of it.
The human part
is so interesting. You talk about health records, for example. India launched a scheme, a health insurance program called the Ayushman Bharat. It's health insurance for every Indian who's, you know, in the poverty bracket. Every family. When you say that, that's 10 million families. That's 500 million, 100 million families, 500 million people. 500 million people. We could roll it out in a matter of 3 months, not even more than that, because we had this basis of the India stack already there, which means today a patient can get identified in southern part of India, northern part of India, can go claim that benefit of a health benefit, and you know, can say, you know, I have availed this. They have upper limit of $8,000 per family, and can come to northern part of India and still continue doing that. It's a complete system built on top of India stack, an innovation called, you know, health system, the health stack on top of India stack. But see, at a scale which has never been thought before, 500 million people are enrolled into a system at a click, absolutely at a click.
So I was having so much fun talking with these guys that I didn't completely keep track of time, but we started a little bit late. I know that the audience, you know, you guys who've come at the end of the day, you know, to hear this discussion are committed to it. So I'm going to say we'll go for 15 more minutes, and so that we have some chance for some questions. Although I still have like a whole bunch, but I'm going to be able to talk to them later on, so I want to give you guys a chance. So any questions you have for Arvind or Sri? If you don't, I'm going to keep going.
While you are thinking of your questions, if at all, let me give you one more thought. That what he said is a very powerful statement. I fully endorse that, Phil. Is that the next billion? I say that, you know, countries like innovation that is happening in Africa, innovation that is happening in India, is going to actually think about innovation for the next 6 billion. The innovation that is coming from Silicon Valley is actually thinking of innovation for the top 1 billion.
Yeah.
The next 6 billion is going to get innovation which is bit-size innovation coming from Africa, coming from India, because that's where the societal problems are. Those are the people who earn $2 a day.
Well, and that's what's so powerful about this meetings and meetings in this category. I'm not just saying GC, but this is entrepreneurship for the 6 billion, not for the 1 billion.
I as people are thinking, so I want to add a dimension to that. I went to Davos last year. Everybody there was talking about blockchain. I went into a depression for almost a week after that, not understanding what happened.
Right.
And when I'm putting up my hand and wanting to talk to people, say I have 4 million people, people were looking for a use case. I mean, the signal that I got out of that was, I mean, I'm not generalizing it, but out in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of technologies which are being invested and being built, and they are all looking for a problem to solve. Whereas in this part of the world, in the developing countries, we have millions and millions of problems, and we need a technology to solve.
Yeah, right.
So this is where I think if you bring the humanization element of technology,
Very well.
yeah. So I mean, the opportunity is real, and the opportunity is here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you know, just to state the obvious, I mean, you know, in meetings like this, it's not infrequent you'll have a panel on water and sanitation. People say 1 billion people don't have toilets.
Correct.
But 1 billion people don't have toilets. It's a 100-year-old technology.
Yeah.
It's an important technology. 1 billion people still don't have it. The internet, like you're bringing the internet and educational services. Yeah, you know, we may have high-speed wireless. We may be getting YouTube content, you know, with fractional latencies. Other people don't have that.
Correct.
So, so it's a frontier technology.
Yeah.
Still waiting, you guys? Okay, here we go. Yeah, somebody's got to ask something.
Vikram, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Phil. Yeah, my name is Vikram. I'm a recent convert to the entrepreneurial world. I've been in banking all my life, foreign banking. This is far exciting, and you know, when I hear Sri and Amit talk about the sheer magnitude of change, I think it's mind-boggling, and hence the stunned silence when you asked for questions, because we were just digesting the numbers you were talking about. You know, as a person who's just come into this fraternity, it's very exciting yet intimidating, because at one end you see people like Sri who've had the tenacity to overcome, you know, several hurdles and build the model. When you talk to somebody and, you know, everybody's looking for, while I represent the capitalist side of actually providing the funding, but, you know, I see kids here from Raipur in India who've come in with brilliant ideas, 12th standard kids. I mean, it's mind-boggling. But you know what, they're intimidated because everybody's going to ask them for a model, a success model. The ideas are brilliant, but can something be done to actually democratize the initiation of ideas rather than asking for a validation of model from, I mean, there are a number of great ideas coming, but can somebody think, and if that already exists, then I'd like to just know what is the best.
No, I can share from my own experience. When I got this idea of Kuza, I didn't ask anyone. I could afford, I could take money from my other pocket and put it in there. I have other tech company where I make money. So the lesson that I learned is if you have an idea, go tell 100 people. Most often in the incubators you see, there are 100 people sitting there and probably half of them are working on a similar idea. I believe that, you know, if you have an idea, and they are keep it very close to their chest. If you have an idea, go tell 100 people. On an average, I used to meet 10 people every day and telling them this is what I'm doing. And the first thing I get is, oh, this is not possible, that is not possible. And experts are your best friends, because an expert is one who will always tell you what is not possible. And experts are always telling me what is not possible. I'm like, okay, I thought you are expert, so you'll tell me a solution. He is always complicating or amplifying the problem, which is great because I just created my wall in my living room and I started writing down all those points. I had close to 1,300 points that I gathered on everybody punching holes into my business model. Actually, I had no business model. I built the business model as I'm interacting with them. So idea is a very dangerous thing. You got to get out of idea and start executing bits and pieces of it. And as you start moving, believe me on this, magic happens. It's magical that I'm sitting here and sitting next to my good old friend Arvind and Phil. I got my visa in 9 hours. I don't know how it happened. I was supposed to be back with my family. I've been away.
That was another thing they told me, was you weren't going to get here. The visa wasn't going to happen. I said, just get the ticket going.
Just get
It'll be
so
fine.
it's just magic happens in life.
Yeah.
You just need to trust the process.
Yeah.
And there are people upstairs. There are a million gods, as they say. They also do their bit. And I'm not talking philosophical here, but it happens. You just need to put your human effort, and things happen. And you don't need to have all the answers.
Actually, I just want to, before I go to the question, I just want to say one thing, which is people talk about getting traction with business models, but traction is a function of friction,
Yeah,
right?
I like it.
So when you run into an obstacle, that's actually how you get traction.
So I don't have a question actually, but you know, Shri, your journey reminds me of something that I keep reminding myself about. That you know there are problems.
Padmaja, you need to introduce yourself. So.
I'm Padmaja. I'm from India and run the Indian Angel Network and the fund. But I think you know your journey actually reminds me of what I have to keep telling myself, because at IAN every day we have to evolve and create a new path.
Mhm.
That's what we do for a living.
Yeah.
And the only way to do it is to say there is a problem, but the problem exists because there has to be a solution. You just need to go find it.
Yeah.
And in Hindi, we have a very popular Bollywood song, which in English just translates the whole world comes, sari kainat ikatte hoke aapko rasta dikhati, which means that the whole world comes
The whole
together.
universe, maybe.
Universe comes together.
Will
And I
collude
think
to give you this.
that is what is written on my laptop every morning when
Wow.
I switch on.
Thank you for sharing that.
Because I think that's the only way one can think. The second piece, I think what both of you are saying is absolutely right, that you know it is the need which is going to create the next billion, right? Which is going to create the huge billion impact, which is going to serve the 6 billion people. I think there's an opportunity also there from a different perspective. You're not only catering to the community and creating the impact, but I think we're sitting in an entrepreneur platform, and it's also the opportunity for investors to understand that that's where the value is going to get created. And it looks like it's going to get created out of countries like from the African continent, or from the Southeast Asian countries like India and all of that. So all I can say that we are sitting on the cusp of opportunity, be it from an entrepreneurial perspective or from an investor perspective. And there couldn't be a better time to do it than now.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
great
Thank you.
job. I really like what you did.
Thank
You
you.
tried to explain it to me over dinner, but today I got a much better.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, the slides make explain it much
Yeah,
better.
that's
so.
the reason I thought of, I will. Yeah.
So, good afternoon. My name is Ashish. I represent the International Trade Center in Geneva. Congratulations to Arvindji and Sri for excellent presentations. I have a question actually for, I guess, for our investor from the Angel Network who just spoke, Padmajaji as well as Arvind. So clearly we have an example of a social entrepreneur sitting in front of us, someone who just decided to go for it, as he said, and achieved what he wanted to achieve. Now, it is an established fact that the only way we will collectively achieve the SDGs is if the private sector, and particularly the social entrepreneurs, play a more important role, like Sri is doing. So my question to you is, on the angel investor side, is there a conscious recognition that perhaps social entrepreneurs are a breed of their own, and are there special programs of the Angel Network, Angel Investors Network, which are targeting social entrepreneurs? And my question to you, Arvindji, more as representing the policymaker side, if you wish, is are there also from the government side specific policies being put in place to give preference and recognize the role being played by social entrepreneurs? Thank you.
So I think a little bit of the answer lies into what Arvind and Sri have talked about. In most of the ventures that angels look at investing, specifically in India and that area, is really impacting a large part of the middle belly of what we call the populace, right? Not the top of the pyramid kind of populace. So it automatically is focused on challenges where there is a need or where there's a problem. So it is need-based innovation and need-based entrepreneurship which is attracting investment, and therefore it does bring automatically social impact. So we do look at innovation, investment and impact in some ways. Having said that, the impact doesn't drive necessarily the innovation, the investment, right? It is very, very much an investment decision, looking for profits and returns, right? Yes, could be muted, but I haven't seen most of our ventures where we've invested in social impact ventures, that we've had any muted investments because it's creating impact. It may be for other reasons which can happen in non-social investments as well. That's how I look at it. Sorry? Tax breaks? So I think the route or the thinking that we have in India, and especially we've not really looked at tax break subsidies for that matter. We haven't. But yes, we have done lobbying for which we've achieved to some extent, is to say we should be at par for our capital gains for, let's say, listed companies. But that's not really driven for social impact, not necessarily for social impact.
Can I add a few things? With Padmaja, I'm a co-founder of the Indian Angel Network. I think that the point you raise is what actually keeps me awake at nights, because you know, this 6 billion problem that you guys alluded to, if it is not going to make money by itself, and it's not that it will not. You gave a terrific example of the debit card fee reduction, where people went berserk saying they'll never make money, and now they are making money.
Absolutely.
Because of the sheer volume of the transactions. Yeah. Airtel, when it was launched, I remember as a kid reading about it, that the ARPU in India is so low, the average revenue per user, that it will never make money. And like the bumblebee, which theoretically should not fly, Airtel made money, and you know, companies were there. But today, that aspect to say that you're doing whatever, you know, drinking water or educating the female child or ensuring an afternoon meal or whatever, and these are the 6 billion people problems. As yet, it attracts the, you know, some sort of a philanthropic money. But it doesn't attract the angel money. It doesn't attract the VC money, that return money. And that is the change. Maybe fiscal incentives that you speak about is the answer. I don't know. But what I'm very keen on happening is that a debate to start on this, because the answer is sitting somewhere and it will emerge. Whether it is fiscal, non-fiscal, fiscal, whether, you know, it's a badge you can wear. I supported a company that saved 2 million lives, and you know, you've given the same credit as you're given when you create a billion, a unicorn.
Yeah.
But some changes will happen, and I think it is a struggle, but having a dialogue on it, and you're raising that question, put it in my mind to say we need to discuss and find a solution.
And I want to add on this. I think philanthropy is good, but for whom, right? And I think that is the BPL, below the poverty line, does need philanthropy, not taking away anything. But I do believe that there is a question in our minds that comes up regularly. When we look at deals, when we look at ventures which are creating social impact, this guy is doing great. We can quietly say, nudge it towards a not-for-profit and say, go raise some philanthropy money, and he might get it also. But the point is, the good work stops when the good money stops. And for good,
Yeah.
good impactful ventures, it's extremely important that they become sustainable. They stand on their own 2 feet and they actually grow and scale. The impact will be humongous.
So there are a couple of interesting data points. I've been struggling in this for over a decade now. A lot of people who love what I'm doing come and tell me, why don't you register a non-profit and we'll fund it? I said, no. I said, no, thank you, not interested. And I've been really taking a bold move and putting a brave face while I know we are really bleeding on the other side, but I had to do that. And here is the formula that is working out. So globally, there is a movement called B Corp. B Corp, it's not C Corp or S Corp, it is B Corp, Benefits Corporation. So the first time in the world, right now, there is a recognition called a B Corp. Kusa has become a B Corp. It took us 6 months, we went through a certification process. No, B Corp is a global, now any company anywhere in the world can go online, go to blab.com, can just participate in that and you will know where you stand as against other companies in the world, and you can go through the compliance process and register yourself. Yeah, so we got a B Corp status. There are a few states in the US who are now calling as Benefits Corp, and as a state, they give tax benefits and other things, but it's a far away for the rest of the world. But that's a step number one. Step number two is I managed to convince the World Banks and the Gates Foundations saying that you put philanthropy capital into an initiative like this for the incubation phase. Our entrepreneurs go through an incubation phase of 1 year. So that's now being supported by the philanthropy capital with the promise that for every dollar you put, we will generate a dollar, sustainable dollar from the year 2, which is phenomenal. And this is where World Bank came to the table. Last week, we've announced a joint program in Kenya to impact 1 million farmers. 1 million farmers to be done in the next 18 months out of a small country called Kenya, where the World Bank is committing their own resources, which will go into the hard things like trainings and others. Now I'm raising capital from philanthropists and social entrepreneurs to see how we can match that. But there is a serious opportunity for real capital to be put into these opportunities, because these are, like Arvind said, these are massive.
Absolutely.
And that was literally on Friday, right?
Yeah.
That's partly why there's such a thin description of the session, because we really only got these guys last week. So it's just such a joy that you're here. But and then you came straight from that to be here.
And at least I can, what question Ashish asked and what Padmaja, Raman and Shri have said. I'll say one thing that we, and I know funds like IAN and VC and angel funds are looking at it in a different manner. We've been far too long dictated by dollar revenue by when it comes to valuations and investments. I think we have to look at other parameters, and a lot of funds have started doing that. Having said that, there is money to be made in this business.
Yes.
And we are misguided when we say this is philanthropy or somebody just doing impact without getting ROI. There is ROI to be made. The whole example of MDR that I talked about, there is money to be made because there are volumes. It's just somebody has to crack the correct code, that's all.
I think that's a...
So they would just come together and the deals in social impact would be open to them. We open the deal and the rest of the network, 400 people, says, excuse me, can I also invest, or do I have to put up my hand there?
The FOMO happens, the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be part of that.
Fear of missing out was one, but ultimately when the company raised money, it had raised more money from those outside of the SIG. So we finally disbanded the SIG.
Yeah, that's great. So I think that's a perfect place to end for a session on entrepreneurship and exponential technology. There's money to be made because there's volume. And that's really what it comes down to. It's that, and we're going to reach people, but also it's business opportunity. It all folds together. So thank you very much. Let's give these guys a hand, because really they made an exceptional effort to be here, and it's been really enjoyable. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.